Have you ever felt something you could not explain? The phone rings, and before it does, you already knew who it was. You think of someone far away, and at that very moment, they think of you. Science calls it coincidence, but perhaps it is a glimpse into a deeper truth. Asha drifted inside her spacecraft near Saturn. Through the glass of her observation window stretched an entire world of wonder. Saturn's rings spun endlessly, made of ice and dust, each fragment older than human memory. The silence outside was infinite. No voices, no music, no birds, no oceans. Only the hum of her ship's engines and her own breath in her helmet. She placed her hand against the glass, her pulse faintly visible in the fog of condensation. For a moment, she felt smaller than a grain of dust. A lone traveler in the ocean of stars. And yet, within that smallness, a peace grew. The vastness was not frightening. It was beautiful. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ben stood in his studio. The night was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of paint. A single lamp flickered, casting golden shadows across his canvas. He lifted his brush, unsure of what to create, but his hand moved without thought. Stroke by stroke, a perfect circle formed. A ring. He did not know why he painted it. But when the circle was complete, he felt calm, as if someone unseen had guided his hand. On one side of the cosmos, an astronaut gazed at rings of ice. On the other, an artist painted rings of gold. Neither knew the other existed, and yet the first thread of connection was woven. Far above Saturn, Asha drifted in the silence of space. Her ship traced its slow orbit, circling the pale giant. The rings stretched endlessly below, shimmering with light. Billions of fragments of ice and rock, each piece perhaps once part of a shattered moon, each shard older than human history. She leaned forward against the glass of her observation window, her reflection faint against the vast horizon. The universe was quiet. No voices, no laughter, no footsteps. Only the steady pulse of her own heart echoing in her ears. For a moment, loneliness pressed against her like the vacuum outside. And then she whispered softly, almost to herself, words she had spoken many times before. "I am not alone." The sound dissolved instantly into the silence of the cabin, but something deeper remained. It was not just a comfort. It was a truth she felt in her bones. At that same hour, far away on Earth, Ben stood alone on a windswept hill. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of grass and rain. Above him stretched the same stars, scattered jewels across the black sky. He gazed upward, paint still clinging to his fingers from hours in the studio. He exhaled, his voice barely more than breath. "I am not alone." The words mirrored hers. They rose into the night and vanished into the wind. But, in some mysterious way, their voices met, their whispers touched, woven together in the invisible chamber of the universe. Science has long wrestled with mysteries like this. Mysteries that stretch the imagination and bend the mind. Entanglement, the strange, delicate bond between particles. Two photons born together remain linked forever. Measure one, and the other reacts instantly. No delay, no message sent across space. It is as though they share the same heartbeat, the same soul, even when galaxies apart. Einstein, brilliant and skeptical, rejected it. He called it spooky action at a distance. To him, physics should be logical, ordered, local. How could one particle know what another particle was doing without any signal traveling between them? It seemed absurd, impossible, and yet experiment after experiment revealed that Einstein was wrong. John Bell proposed a test, the famous Bell's theorem. He showed that if entanglement were real, measurements would defy all classical logic. Scientists performed the tests. Again and again, the results confirmed the impossible. Entanglement was not a trick of theory, it was real. In 2022, the Nobel Prize in Physics was awarded to Alan Aspect, John Clauser, and Anton Zeilinger, pioneers, who proved with certainty that entangled particles behave as one, no matter the distance, no matter the separation. Reality itself is woven by invisible threads. Asha knew this. She had studied it in classrooms, read it in journals, simulated it in labs. But alone in her spacecraft, whispering into silence, she wondered if entanglement reached beyond particles. If perhaps it wove into people too. And as she gazed into the vastness across the earth, Ben's eyes lifted to the same sky. Two strangers, two lives. Yet both carried the same whisper. Both carried the same truth, that they were not alone, and maybe neither are we. Perhaps every thought, every whisper, every bond of love or grief or longing is part of a greater web, the silent entanglement of all souls. When you think of someone at the exact moment they think of you, when you dream of a face you've never met, when you feel a presence though no one is near, maybe it is not coincidence. Maybe it is the whisper of the universe reminding us, we are not alone. We never were. We never will be. That night, Asha slept. The hum of the spacecraft was steady, like the heartbeat of some great machine. Beyond the glass, Saturn's rings glowed faintly, reflecting the distant sun. Inside the small cabin, her body rested, but her mind drifted, and, in her dream, a face appeared. A man's face. Dark eyes, filled with kindness, yet searching, as if looking for something lost. The dream felt more real than memory. She reached out, almost touching him, but the dream dissolved before her. Fingers could meet. She woke suddenly, breath shallow. Her cabin was dark, the only sound the whisper of recycled air. For a moment she sat still, the dream pressing on her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered softly. Her voice broke the silence, but no answer came. On Earth, at the very same hour, Ben could not sleep. The night was heavy with silence, the city around him asleep, but his heart restless. He reached for his sketchbook. The pencil touched paper almost without thought. Line after line flowed, shaping into eyes, a gaze that held both strength and sorrow. When he finished, he froze. The woman on the page was not from his memory, not from his life, yet her eyes burned with familiarity. He whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own words. "Why do I feel like I know you?" The drawing stared back at him, a stranger who felt like home. Science speaks of dreams as the mind's theater, neurons firing, memories reshaped, fragments of thought stitched together. But sometimes dreams carry more weight than imagination. Sometimes they feel borrowed, as if the dream does not belong to us alone. Could consciousness itself be entangled? Could two minds, like two particles, share fragments across the void? Quantum physics teaches us that particles can be linked, two photons separated by galaxies, yet acting as though they are one. So why not thoughts? Why not dreams? Asha tried to dismiss it. She told herself it was loneliness, her mind fabricating, faces to ease the silence. But the eyes from her dream would not leave her. They lingered, a ghost of memory she had never lived. Ben, too, tried to explain. He told himself it was just imagination, a trick of fatigue, a stranger's face born from random lines. But he found himself sketching again and again. The same eyes, the same woman, emerging night after night from his hand. And so, across the gulf of space, two strangers carried each other in their dreams. One painted the face he had never seen. One remembered the eyes she had never met. There is a mystery that lingers at the edge of science. Consciousness itself. Physicists can measure particles, predict their behavior, chart the fabric of space-time. But what is the mind? What is awareness? Some say it is merely biology, neurons firing like circuits. Others whisper that consciousness is woven into the very foundation of reality, a field as deep and real as gravity itself. If that is true, then perhaps dreams are not bound to the walls of our skulls. Perhaps they drift. Perhaps they entangle. Perhaps they cross the void, seeking the minds they are tied to. Asha kept the dream inside her heart, not daring to speak it aloud in her mission reports. Ben kept the sketches hidden, not daring to explain them to his friends. But night after night, their invisible bond grew stronger. 2 lives, 2 minds, 1 dream shared across the silence of the cosmos. And both asking the same unanswerable question: who are you? Far out in the orbit of Saturn, silence reigned. The spacecraft moved like a speck of dust against a planet so immense its storms could swallow Earth whole. Asha had grown used to the silence, the quiet hum of the engines, the occasional flicker of data on her screens, the endless black beyond the window. But on this night, something shifted. The lights dimmed. A low vibration shook the cabin. One by one, alarms screamed to life, red warnings flashing across her console. Her ship shuddered as Saturn's magnetic field surged with sudden violence, a storm of charged particles tearing across the emptiness. Asha's breath caught. Her training whispered in her mind, "Stay calm, analyze, respond." But fear is louder than reason. Her hands trembled over the controls. The screens blurred through the film of panic in her eyes. She whispered to herself, over and over, a desperate mantra: "Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm." The cabin felt smaller, the air thinner. For a fleeting moment, she imagined the void breaking in, ripping her apart, scattering her across the rings of Saturn. And then, across the gulf of worlds, Ben stirred. On Earth, the night was restless. A storm of his own gathered outside, rain tapping on the glass of his studio window, wind pushing against the walls of his home. Ben could not sleep. He rose from his chair, fingers brushing across the strings of his guitar. He had no plan, no song in mind, but the music came anyway. The first note was fragile, uncertain. The second, stronger. And then the melody unfolded, soft as a heartbeat, steady as breath. The notes floated into the night, not carried by air alone, but by something deeper, something unseen. In her failing ship, Asha felt her chest loosen. The alarms still wailed, the storm still raged, but inside her heart, a calmness spread. Her breath slowed, her hands steadied. It was as if invisible arms held her still, as if a voice whispered without sound, "You are not alone." She reached for the controls again, this time not with panic but with clarity. Step by step, she rerouted the failing systems, closing power lines, stabilizing the reactor, riding out the storm with new resolve. And when at last the cabin lights steadied and the alarms faded into silence, she collapsed back into her seat, tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. She had survived, not because of training alone, not because of willpower alone, but because something greater had reached across the void to remind her that she was never truly alone. Meanwhile, Ben set, his guitar down. The final note lingered in the air, a trembling echo that seemed to hum longer than sound should. He closed his eyes. His heart was strangely light, as if some burden had lifted, though he could not name what it was. He looked at the sketch on his desk, the face of the woman he did not know, the woman who haunted his dreams. He whispered into the silence, "Who are you?" He did not expect an answer. Yet in that moment, far above Saturn, Asha whispered the same words, softly, into her cabin. And though neither heard the other, the whispers met. Science might dismiss this as chance, But science also teaches us that distance is not always what it seems. Quantum entanglement shows us that space itself can be deceiving. Two particles, born together, remain one, even when separated by light years. Measure one, and the other knows instantly, without any message, without any delay. It is as if they are not apart at all, but still touching, still united. Einstein could not accept it. He argued it was impossible, but the universe does not bow to our comfort. Again and again, experiments proved him wrong. Entanglement was not imagination, it was truth. Particles can be woven together in ways that distance cannot sever, and if particles can be, then perhaps people can too. Asha survived that night because of more than science. Because in the quietest hour when her fear was greatest, she felt a presence that did not belong to her alone. And Ben, on Earth, found his hands guided by a melody that seemed to come from somewhere beyond himself. Two storms, two hearts, one thread, and so we ask. When you feel calm without reason, when you hear music in your soul that no one plays, when you sense the presence of another though they are far away, is it coincidence, or is it the whisper of entanglement, reminding us that we are never truly apart? In that storm, Asha and Ben discovered a truth greater than distance, greater than silence, greater even than fear. They discovered that in the vast and infinite cosmos, connection is stronger than separation. That, in the deepest solitude, we are never alone. Time moved forward. The storm that had threatened Asha's ship became a memory, but the feeling it left behind lingered. She floated once more in silence above Saturn, the pale golden planet turning slowly beneath her. From her cabin window, she saw storms swirl across its atmosphere, ribbons of cloud circling endlessly, a dance billions of years old. The rings glimmered like frozen rivers of time, stretching outward, wider than the distance between Earth and its moon. Yet, inside her ship, Asha felt something closer than her own breath. A presence, unseen, unspoken, but undeniably there. She carried it with her like a companion. When she ate, when she worked, when she drifted to sleep. The sense that she was not alone never left her. It comforted her in the long nights when the universe outside felt endless and cold. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ben lived his own life. He painted, he sketched, he lost himself in colors and shapes that seemed to come from beyond his own imagination. But again and again, one image returned. Circles, glowing, endless, golden. The rings of a planet he had never seen with his eyes, yet knew in his bones. He tried to paint other things, fields, rivers, people, but the rings pulled him back like gravity, and again, eyes appeared in his work. A woman's eyes. A stranger, yet someone he could not stop remembering. Visitors came to his gallery. They walked among the canvases, staring at worlds he had never touched, faces he had never met. "How?" they whispered. "How can he paint what he has not seen?" Some said he was a visionary. Others said his work was memory disguised as art. Ben only smiled quietly, but inside, he felt the same question burning. Where do these visions come from? And so their lives moved, like two rivers flowing side by side. They did not touch, they did not meet, yet they mirrored each other's currents. When Asha gazed through her porthole into the dark, Ben stared into the night sky. When Ben whispered, "To the stars," Asha whispered into her cabin. The words were the same, soft, fragile, almost prayer-like. Who are you? Science has names for such mysteries, though they are often wrapped in equations and symbols. Quantum entanglement is one. Such name. In the quantum world, particles do not behave as separate things. They are connected, entangled. Even when torn apart, even when separated by galaxies, they are still one. Measure one, and the other instantly reflects the change. No signal travels between them. No force pushes or pulls. It is simply so. To many, this seems impossible. It breaks the rules of logic and distance, but experiment after experiment confirms it, and the more scientists probe, the stranger the truth becomes. Perhaps reality is not made of parts, but of wholes. Perhaps what we call separation is only an illusion. If this is true, then maybe our lives are like entangled particles too. Maybe the people who appear in our dreams, the ones whose voices echo in our hearts, are connected to us in ways science cannot yet measure. Maybe every bond, every love, every sudden thought of another is part of an unseen web that stretches across time and space. Asha felt this when she dreamed of the stranger's face. Ben felt it when his hand painted what his eyes had never seen. Neither could prove it. Neither could explain it. But both lived it. At night, Asha closed her eyes in orbit, the ship humming around her, and she felt him. A warmth, a nearness, as if someone sat quietly at her side. And at the same hour, Ben closed his eyes on Earth, and he felt her. Not in detail, not in sight, but in the gentle certainty that someone was walking with him through the dark. Two lives, two souls, never meeting, yet moving as though choreographed by the same unseen hand. They were not alone. Not truly. For even across light years they shared the same song, the same pulse, the same entangled rhythm of existence. And so we ask ourselves, how many of our own lives run in parallel with others? How many strangers dream of us as we dream of them? How many unseen threads connect us across oceans, across years, across the invisible fabric of the universe? Perhaps more than we dare to imagine. Perhaps the person you feel thinking of you, right now, the one you cannot explain, is closer than you know. Not in miles, but in truth. For life itself may be a web of parallels, woven together by entanglement, not by chance, not by accident, but by the very design of the cosmos. Years passed. For Asha, the journey through the silence of space became a part of her, etched into her very being. The storms of Saturn, the rings of ice, the endless black horizon. All of it lived in her eyes now, a memory she could never forget. For Ben, time unfolded in colors and shapes. Canvas after canvas filled his studio, each one a fragment of a dream, a memory of something he had never seen with his waking eyes. He painted rings, he painted stars, he painted faces, especially the face that haunted him night after night. The woman with searching eyes, the woman who felt like a stranger and yet like home. And so 2 lives flowed on in parallel, separate yet bound, each carrying the other in silence, each moving closer without knowing it. One evening, after her mission had ended, Asha walked through the streets of her city. The air felt heavy with scents she had almost forgotten. Fresh bread from a bakery, smoke rising from chimneys, the distant murmur of people's voices blending in the dark. It was strange to walk again among crowds after so long with only the stars as company. Yet in the midst of noise, she felt more alone than she had in space. Her steps slowed before a quiet building. Its windows glowed softly, and inside she saw walls lined with paintings. Something stirred inside her chest. She pushed the door open. The gallery was hushed, the air thick with the smell of paint and wood. Soft lights illuminated canvases, each one holding visions of another world. Her heart quickened. On one wall, she saw Saturn's rings, painted in gold, shimmering like frozen sunlight. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, her hands trembling, and then she froze. In the corner of the canvas, hidden within the paint, was a face. Her own. her eyes staring back at her through the brushstrokes of a stranger. She whispered so quietly that even she barely heard it. "How?" Across the room, Ben looked up. He had been arranging frames, lost in thought when he felt it. A sudden pull, like gravity, like something he could not resist. And then he saw her. The woman from his dreams. The woman he had painted again and again, without ever knowing why. Standing before his canvas, her eyes locked on his. For a moment, time collapsed. All the years of whispers, all the nights of dreams, all the storms and melodies and questions. They condensed into a single gaze. No sound, no words, just knowing. Asha turned slowly. Their eyes met, and in that silence, everything became full. Every dream, every sketch, every whispered, "Who are you?" suddenly had its answer. Neither spoke. They did not need to, for in that instant, they knew. It was as if the universe itself had bent its laws, not for particles this time, but for souls. As if the invisible thread they had carried in silence had finally drawn them into the same space, the same breath, the same moment. Science might ask, how? What force carried a dream across light years? What signal whispered one life into another? But some truths cannot be captured by instruments. Some realities are not measured, but felt. Just as entangled photons respond without distance, perhaps entangled souls find each other, no matter how far they drift. The gallery faded into silence around them. Paintings stood as witnesses, rings and stars echoing their story. They stepped toward one another, hesitant yet certain, like two rivers finally merging after lifetimes apart. Ben opened his mouth as if to speak, but Asha shook her head softly. No words were needed. The truth was already between them, woven, in silence, etched into every moment of their lives. Later that night, they walked together beneath the sky. The stars stretched overhead, cold and infinite, yet no longer lonely. Ben lifted his hand, pointing to a faint glimmer above the horizon. "There, Saturn." Asha's lips curved into a quiet smile. Her eyes glistened, not with sadness, but with the weight of knowing. The journey she had carried in solitude was never hers alone. It had always been theirs. And in that moment, beneath the vast and silent cosmos, they understood. Not all meetings happen in the same room. Some begin in whispers across the void. Some begin in dreams. Some are carried by music or painted by hands that do not know why they move. But when the time is right, the parallel paths converge, the entangled souls meet, and the universe itself seems to pause as if in recognition. Two lives, two worlds, one connection. The meeting was not an ending. It was the beginning. The night was clear. The city's noise had quieted, the streets dimmed, and above them stretched the infinite tapestry of stars. Asha and Ben walked side by side, their footsteps slow, unhurried, as though time itself had softened around them. Neither spoke. There was no need. The silence between them was not empty. It was full. Full of all the years they had carried each other without knowing. Full of dreams and sketches, of whispers across the void, of music and storms and unspoken questions. For the first time, they were no longer parallel lines. They were one path. They reached a quiet hill at the edge of the city. Ben lifted his hand and pointed upward. "There," he said softly. Asha followed his gaze. Faint but visible, a small star-like glow shimmered in the night sky. Saturn, distant, cold, majestic. The planet that had once been her only companion and yet, in truth, had never left her alone. Her lips curved into a quiet smile. She felt the weight of memory. The hum of her ship, the storms that had nearly swallowed her, the nights she whispered into the silence. not knowing her words had already found their way to him. Ben lowered his hand, but his eyes never left. The sky. "It feels strange," he murmured. "I've painted that place for years, without ever knowing why. And now, I understand." Asha turned to him. Her voice was soft, almost a breath. "We were already there, not in body, but in something deeper, entangled, all along. Science teaches us that reality is not as separate as it seems. We believe ourselves to be islands, bodies cut off from the rest of the world. But physics whispers otherwise. Entangled particles behave not as two, but as one. No matter the distance, they share the same state. Touch one, and the other shivers instantly. It does not matter if they are across a lab or across a galaxy. They are inseparable, and perhaps so are we. Perhaps love, memory, and connection are not fragile illusions of the mind, but the deepest truths of the universe. Threads binding us together in ways we cannot yet measure, but can feel." Asha and Ben stood together in silence. The night deepened. The stars above pulsed with ancient fire, and the earth turned gently beneath their feet. They were small, two figures on a small planet, orbiting a modest star in the outskirts of a vast galaxy. And yet, in their smallness, they held infinity. For what is the universe, if not the sum of all its entanglements? Atoms bound into molecules, molecules bound into bodies, bodies bound into stories, stories bound into love. Everything connected, everything one. Ben's eyes softened. "Do you think," he asked quietly, "that everyone is like this? That we're all connected somehow?" Asha looked back at the stars, her face calm, serene. "I think the universe has been telling us all along. When you think of someone before they call, when you feel a presence in your solitude, when your dreams carry a face you've never met, those are the threads. We ignore them, but they are there." Ben nodded slowly. "And maybe, when people say love lasts forever, this is what they mean." Asha smiled. "Not forever. Forever is too small. Love lasts beyond time, beyond space, because it is woven into the fabric of reality itself." The wind whispered softly around them. The stars shimmered like countless eyes, watching, knowing. The night sky was no longer a void, but a mirror, reflecting the truth they had discovered, that separation is an illusion. In that moment, the universe felt less like a cold expanse and more like a great heartbeat, pulsing through them both. And so their story, though written in silence and distance, resolved not in ending, but in revelation. That we are more than bodies, more than voices, more than fleeting sparks of life on a tiny planet. We are threads of the same cosmic fabric. We are notes in the same eternal song. We are particles, souls, destinies, entangled. In the language of physics, entanglement belongs to particles, but in the language of existence, it belongs to us all. Two lives, two worlds, one connection, and so the lesson is simple yet infinite. You are not alone. You never were. You never will be. Because in the vast and silent universe, we are all entangled, bound together by threads unseen, woven into a single story, forever.